I wanted to talk a little bit about the CPT, and that will kind of play into what we're seeing with V-Shift. Specifically, I want to talk about Japan's usage of V-Shift because Japan is revered as one of, if not the strongest areas collectively for fighting games, specifically Street Fighter. That's contested in more recent times, but I think pound for pound, if you line up the strongest Japanese players, man, you could definitely at least make the argument that that's your cream of the crop in terms of Street Fighter right now. And we just had our first CPT event. It was in Japan, so you got the likes of Daigo, Tokido, Itazan, all those names, Momochi and such. We went back I went back and watched, I think it was 7 or 8 matches of the top 8. And was trying to see, okay, so Japan has had V-Shift. They've had this new meta. They've had this new version of the game with the balances and such, and the bigger hurt boxes on heavy buttons, which I think is a bigger deal than we initially thought it was going to be. And how are they playing it? What kind of style? And this is at the top of the top, so it's a little bit different than what you're probably going to see if you just jump into ranked and you're at diamond level or wherever. But this is also, where we like to go when we want to analyze tier lists, at the best of the best. If you play characters optimally, who wins out? Who wins the most? What are the matchups like? So this is pretty much our closest sampling to something like that. And what we found was, there wasn't a ton of V-shifting. In fact, I may or may not have a perfect count here, but in the first 69 rounds, which was that first, I think, 8 matches, there was a total of 8 V-shifts used by either, and that's not a ton, that's one every, I don't know, I didn't do the math, but not every round for sure. And so I went through and kind of documented how it was used. It was almost never used in the corner. Usually to just escape like a setup, like if Colleen throws up some ice hail and it's on your wake up, maybe use it there. And then every once in a while, that was the option to go to in terms of just trying to escape like a Zangief vortex. Daigo used it once against Itazan, but so incredibly often, the way that the Japanese players were playing told me that V-trigger is just so much more worth it than V-shift. Not V-reversal though. They use V-reversal a lot more. Not every single round, but a lot. So I'm not exactly sure where that puts us. I think that, we've talked about V-shift quite a bit, and I guess that's a good little setup to see, well, how does that bounce off of you? What does that make you think and feel?
It's player dependent. Daigo's barely using V-shift at all right now, and but Momochi was using it quite a bit. I remember that Momochi used it the best throughout the tournament. I think Momochi got 3rd, something like that. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I'll look it up here in the background. But
he used it. He used it. Let's see, twice in his match against Fudo, and then he didn't use it at all in his match against John Takuchi.
Okay. Yeah. How about like against like Kawano and Tokido? I thought he used it quite a bit there. Yeah,
he might have. I didn't get that far with the Momochi. But in Tokido, I did not see Tokido use it a single time in the 2 matches of his that I saw.
Yeah. Using a 3-bar V-trigger character, I think V-shifts is quite a bit more of a risk, but if you do have a 2-bar V-trigger character, I think it's a little bit more acceptable to use V-shift. I think Japan is probably like the country I'm seeing least consistently use V-shift well right now. And Momochi, I think, was one exception to it. I think other people are using it decently, but I don't think they've quite figured it out, and it seems harder for the players that I'm seeing them play consistently to get away from the old way of doing things and embrace the new way. Because the new way, I mean, again, it's Capcom's designers out there that are doing this stuff, and they've built so much of the game around it. They're heavy believers in it. There's a history of Capcom not getting some of that stuff right, but for the most part, they get it right. They do a really good job.
Yeah. Now, that seems to, the way we've had things set up, right? And it's like, well, V-shift is sort of something of an answer or a counterweight, if you will, to the offense that a lot of the V-triggers presented and that was very problematic in the past. Now, even though we didn't see a ton of V-shift used in the sample that I took here, and like you're saying, Japan's not using it as much, the rounds are going way longer. And yes, V-triggers are still a huge, very important part of the match, but we're seeing so much more in the way of footsies. Like, people are just dancing around, and for like 20 seconds, there will be like no contact. It'll just be, footsie play and trying to whiff punish. A lot of buttons just seeing that are just put out there to check forward advances or to check whiffs, that may or may not happen. But that's the sort of pacing and style this game is at now. And I know that I've seen in my own matches, especially against Dream King, our rounds are going way longer, sometimes down to the wire, and it's like, and like I was saying here, rounds are getting down to the wire there. They're going down in 20 seconds or so, and it's a much slower paced match where there's a lot more going on than just this race to V-trigger and then explode and someone's dead when the dust settles and you're at 70 or 69 seconds. It's actually almost always 69 seconds. I know it's a funny joke, but it's also I noticed it, and so it's been helpful because now I'm like, wow, it's going a lot longer than that amount of time. And so something has very clearly changed. And I watched on a lot of wake-up situations. The Japanese players are very much aware of the potential of V-Shift because everyone and their mother... The implication,
John. The implication.
The implication, yes.
Yes.
Everyone and their mother is doing throw oki for as people stand up. And they're not... Well, maybe they're not quite ready for it because there's a lot of throws where the V-shift does come out in the times that it was used, because people are throwing so much on people's wake up that when they did V-shift, it was it was an answer to a throw. But a lot of times, and I'm not know if every character can do this, but I know with Zangief, if he whiffs a throw, he's still in range to SBD you, as I understand it. So you technically can be setting up to beat a V-shift with a throw Oki. And we weren't seeing that very much. A lot of the times the V-shift did successfully get people out, but that might be the next sort of evolution of studying it, is not only to see how to use it, but then know exactly how your character can punish other characters when they use it, where they use it, whether or not they go different distances or stuff like that. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but there was a lot more throw wake up.
One of the ways of breaking it is if you get point blank on someone, you don't want to whiff a throw, but basically you do a meaty throw right as they're waking up. If they do V-shift, you can often hit them with a crush counter button. Mm-hmm. With Abigail, it was crouching heavy punch, and then with a few other characters, but there was the OS there. But I mean, keep in mind, if someone throw techs on the meaty throw attempt, then they're good. It's an option select to beat V-shift specifically. But the way you defeat that is just throw tech on your wake up, and then you tech, and
mm-hmm.
you're good to go.
So I've been assuming that with the V-shift being in place, like you say, the implication has been having a fairly heavy effect on the meta of the game, mm-hmm. and that would seem to stand as that's the biggest new thing that's come into this game and that's affected things. But as I watch it here, and as I play my own games, I'm aware of V-shift, especially when I'm under pressure, and I've used it a few times, but I don't find myself using it all that much, and it doesn't seem to be resonating on quite that level where it would actually be affecting my decision making to the degree that I thought it would. That's not to say it doesn't have an effect, but when I look at some of the other changes that have happened, when Capcom also attended to a lot of the problem normals. Like I said earlier, a lot of the heavy buttons have more recovery or bigger hurt boxes on them so that you can whiff punish them, and some of their moves, some of the V triggers have been tweaked around so that they don't last as long, or so that they're not quite as effective, not quite as versatile. And I think it's all of these different things that have contributed to the change in the meta. It has to be, but I'm starting to lean more toward it's more in the realm of these 5's changes that have had the bigger impact, because so much of these rounds we're seeing played by the top level players, and so much in the style that I've been playing as of late. And I think I talked about it last week a bit with playing Necalli V Trigger 2 or V Skill 2, and how much that slowed down our rounds, the rounds that mm-hmm. I've been playing. I've really been playing this whiff punish game, this 5's game, and so many rounds end with something like a well-placed low forward. They didn't go into anything. It was just that was the last hit, as opposed to overwhelming offense kind of a thing with a V-trigger rush down.
And speaking of Necalli, you always play EXDP characters, and I have never played a character that's had an invincible reversal in this game. I've always played characters that don't have it, and so the implication of V-shift is much larger for me. Well, now I have Rose with an EX Soul Spiral. Oh my gosh, mm-hmm. It's we'll get into that in a minute, but V-shift is a bigger deal for me because I've never had an EX reversal. You have yet to play a character in this game, as far as I know, that does not have an EX reversal. Honda would be kind of the one exception to that, but even then, you only played him for a little while.
Well, and it's just kind of, but you can use that EX headbutt semi EX reversal ways,
Yeah.
I will.
So I think that if you've played characters without an EX reversal, like a lot of people have, I think this is V shift is a bigger deal. And if you've already got that, if you're a Guile player, if you're a Ryu player, if you're whoever, this is not as big of a deal because being able to stop momentum is one of the things that Combo Fiend told us back in the day. He's like, look, guys, like, if you can stop momentum in this game, it's huge. You don't, and that's how come they made the whole crush counter punish system on invincible reversals. Shouts to Rose not having that, but that is the whole reason they made it. They're like, you don't understand how powerful that is. And when you can stop that momentum, it's just huge. And it's like, I get it now, because with V-Shift, I can stop that momentum with, like, where I could with Manat. I pretty much stopped playing her very shortly after V-Shift came out with her. But
how often do you find yourself using V-Shift? I know you haven't been playing in, like, the last 2 weeks because you've been, like, I guess, letting your muscle memory kind of die down so you'd be ready for Rose. But, like, how often do you think a V-Shift comes into play? Once a round, twice a round, once a match?
It depends entirely on who I'm playing and what kind of style I'm going for. And my meta is still evolving with it. We talked about it before where it's like, is it a good idea? Because in the past we talked about just the moment you get V-Trigger, activate. Don't hesitate, don't think, just put a button on someone and activate because you get a free 50-50 mix-up. Yeah. And then we were talking now where it's like, hey, maybe you want to save that V-Shift for when your opponent activates because it gets you out of those 50-50 situations.
Not Japan, but yes.
Yes, exactly. Well, so there's an interesting point here, and I really think that V-Shift is going to take on kind of a life of its own in 3 to 6 months, not in terms of like everyone's using it, but everyone's understanding of it has grown so much, because I think a lot of people are behind the 8 ball and they're like, you know what I'm going to do, because I want to win this tournament, I'm going to play the exact same way I have been before for the most part, but I'm going to add some stuff in there. And you and I have both been high level players. We're pretty decent right now, right? And it's like, if we're trying to win a tournament, we're trying to put in as much old stuff as we can that we know is good and not trying to do a bunch of new stuff. And if you want proof of that, look at how many people, look at how many pros pick up a brand new character versus how many people stick with Cammy, Rashid, and others. They want to go the tried and true method because they know that works. Why are you going to add this whole new thing in there that you don't know works and you're not 100% sure about? And I think that's what Japan primarily is doing. Now, if you're someone like Europe, Phenom and Hurricane and a few others and stuff, you're seeing V-Shift way more often. And I think when the European CPT comes up, people are going to really have their eyes open to how good V-Shift is. And man, I wish we were having cross-country play again, because I think Europe would come in and kick the living balls out of everyone right now. I literally think Europe is the #1 place, and I think they're kicking so much butt. And yes, it's V-Shift. I'm not hyped up about V-Shift, but if you look at what they're doing, it's like, it's so impressive, and no one else is doing it at their level. But there it is.
I'm gonna try to find some kind of graphic to represent living balls for the second.
Yeah, I don't know exactly where to go with that one, but anyway, I'm hyped up about Europe, man. I love what Europe is doing with this game, but it does fit my narrative, right? Of V-Shift being good. But
well,
anyway.
and that's the next, or whenever the European CPT event is, that'll be when we get that bit of data, right? And to put it all together and compile, we're just going off of what we've seen so far, what we've experienced so far. Yeah, so...
Oh, and I should say the U.S. West and East players look to be using V-Shift pretty well too. It's not just Europe, but there's some other regions that aren't doing it that well. But I do see it in the U.S. quite a bit more too.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it'll only take, like you're kind of getting at there, that one person or two people that really have figured out how to use it and make it look good, and then everyone else will be like, well, if it is this. If it is this powerful, then everyone else will be like, oh, well, there you go. Now I can start doing that. Now I can start adopting it. And then from there, you got people that are, like minds like Javits that kind of think the next couple of steps down the line there. And then you're off to the races, and it's an evolving thing. I don't know how much it matters right now in terms of like where I'm at with it, but it's not... It feels like a fairly minor thing that will be nice for certain situations, but isn't changing the outcomes of a lot of rounds, at least by itself. I think the other factors, the other changes that have happened to this game are the primary changers of why we're seeing rounds go longer, why we're seeing more footsie play. But regardless of why that's happening, I am so glad that it is, because this is so much closer to the game that I'm hoping to play when I boot up a Street Fighter game. And for so long, it's just been well, the old tired race to V trigger, blow each other up, score a reversal jab or an interruption jab in there, and it's just as good as getting a crush counter in certain scenarios. And the risk and reward of doing things, and the inclination or the reward that comes with playing a strong footsie game and developing those fundamental tools, which are actually really rewarding to pull off in an actual match. Like Street Fighter V, I think I can say conclusively is in the best spot it's ever been. It's the most fun that it's ever been. And even with a character that I dare say, like Nikali, who doesn't have the greatest... he's not set up to be the best character within this particular atmosphere of the way the game runs right now, but I can still play him, and I can still rely on out-footsying my opponent to the degree that it's worth trying to do, and I can get wins out of it. And it might be a little harder than if I'm playing someone like Chun-Li or like Cammy, but I'm having fun doing it, and that's a good sign as far as I'm concerned.